Hello! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Mildly Interesting Podcast. If you like the stuff that we do, please do give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook as well. I believe we have a Facebook page.
We do have a Facebook page.
I keep most of the social medias up to date. You will be seeing some tweets from me, I guess, while we're recording this relatively soon, because I have done a funny and not been able to access the accounts, but it's cool. We fixed it. But yes, give us a follow on those, subscribe, and hit that bell on YouTube so you know when we post. And also give us a follow, rate us on Spotify as well. Turn your notifications on for our podcast so you know when episodes drop. We also have a website, mildly-interesting.co.uk. We have some articles up on there that Santos has written, the experienced journalist amongst us. And also all the episodes are posted up there. But I believe, without further ado, I am Akash Lush.
And I'm Johnson.
And this is Mildly Interesting.
Mildly interesting. No, seriously, just mildly interesting.
How are we doing today, Santos?
I'm doing good. I'm really tired, but I suppose that's what you'd expect.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems that, everyone's been working hard. Talking about working hard in possibly the top position in the country. Rishi Sunak has been the Prime Minister of Britain for about less than 2 weeks now, and has already made some sweeping statements, which have kind of framed how his prime ministerial tenure, I guess you would say, is going to play out. Rishi Sunak is following on the heels of Liz Truss after she resigned because of a disastrous mini budget. Just after, I think, less than 50 days of being prime minister. So Rishi Sunak is Britain's third prime minister this year, which is kind of ridiculous that I'm even getting to say that sentence. But
yeah,
I think a lot of people are now looking towards him to see what does he bring to the table? What kind of prime minister is he going to be? So Santos, what do we know about our fairly new prime minister Rishi Sunak?
All right. So first things first. I just want to say something really quick. Obviously, this is the fourth prime minister in 4 years. That means that an average of one prime minister a year we're running at the moment. But also, I just want to point out something before we start even talking about this. I have somewhat of a funny stat for you. Did you know, by the time that Liz Truss stepped away from power, her approval ratings were lower than Putin's? So that's
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah, so she had lower approval ratings than Putin's, and that just made me crack up when I saw it.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Anyway, Sunak, yeah, I think we can expect him to sort of like to be the return to normal of British politics, right? We kind of expected it from Truss when she first got into power, which is really weird. But now I think we can just expect Sunak to be a bit more moderate in what he does, even though that he still has those Tory tendencies, so to speak. For instance, since taking office, he has already pledged to essentially build on the failure of Truss and try to revert everything she did, essentially. But we also are probably going to see him being way more lenient than you might expect from Sunak, just because obviously the Tories are still coming back from Truss's government, which means that their approval ratings are absolutely terrible. So you will probably see a more like middle ground Sunak, just as they try to sort of like build up that confidence again. For instance, we've seen since he took office that he went back on a policy to cut maternity leave. That's one of the things he did. He also scrapped his own plan to control immigration, which he talked about during the short race for his premiership. So he's essentially making it more approachable, more affordable, and more legal, I suppose you could say. And on latest developments on COP27, which, by the way, he wasn't supposed to attend, or he didn't want to attend, but he was kind of forced into it with pressure from the public, essentially. He's also urged countries to move faster on renewables, which is something that we don't really see from Tories all that much. Whether that's just blank statements, that just remains to be seen. They probably are. Obviously, we did cover COP26 when it happened, and since then what happened was absolutely nothing. But yeah, what is interesting though, I think, is the fact that since he took office, obviously the markets have recovered quite a bit, which is not really surprising considering the state of that they were in before he left. But also is the confidence on the Tory party has increased. So current polls still have the Labour winning on a 25-point majority, I think, is the latest thing I've seen. But it was way bigger before he got into power, and it's just steadily increasing. So we might see Sunak sort of approach Labour in the next 2 years. But yeah, what about you, Akash? What do you think we should expect from him? And do you think he can pull the Tories back from the slump that Truss left him in?
It's very interesting because usually you can make a judgment on a politician based on their supporters or the people they surround themselves with or the people that they throw their support behind. And a person of great contention in government that Rishi Sunak has supported and has in turn supported him is Suella Braverman. If that name sounds familiar, that's because Suella Braverman was forced to resign a week roughly before Liz Truss resigned. And she was forced to resign over ministerial code breaches, which involved sharing government documents from her private email. From the contents of the email, the investigation states, it was clear that this was a deliberate act, and yet she wasn't sacked, and her security clearance wasn't even revoked. She was just told to resign. Jake Berry, who serves as party chairman under Liz Truss, but was fired under Mr. Sunak, stated that there has been multiple breaches of the ministerial code. However, one of Sunak's first, directives or orders as prime minister was to reinstate Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. Who knows why? It might certainly have nothing to do with the fact that 2 days prior to this decision, Miss Braverman had thrown her support behind Sunak in the contest to replace Miss Truss, and that she is an influential figure on the far right, or just the general right, of the Conservative Party. So it seems as though Sunak is making alliances within his party, including those on the right, maybe deemed by, some as traditional conservatives, if that makes sense. But it's like you said, it does seem as though he's trying to be the middle person for now. He's trying to appease all sides, as we have seen some quote unquote liberal policies. He one of his first major moves was to reinstate the ban on fracking or hydraulic fracturing, which is the act of drilling into the earth, directing high pressure mixture of water, sand, and chemicals to release gas inside the earth, like rocks within the earth's layers. It's a fossil fuel, and so he's reinstated the ban, and it's seen as a sort of win for climate change activists and sort of just environment, like sort of renewable energy and environmental protections. But there are. He also said that he promised a vaccine-style task force to tackle NHS backlogs, saying this issue would be one of his top priorities. He previously said he planned to expand the network of specialist surgical centers and community diagnostic hubs in order to eliminate 1 year NHS waiting times and to get overall numbers failing by next year. So he's tackled environmental environmental protection, and he's tackled the NHS, two sort of big issues for the UK public. But if you scratch beneath the surface, there are some things he's done that are questionable, and I think, what was it that you said, Santos? I really like the phrasing you had, Tory tendencies.
Yeah, so that's the kind of policy that you expect from Tories, just in general, really.
We are from what he said before, he has previously taken hardline stances against immigration. I think the scrapped plan that you were talking about that he proposed was a cap on the number of refugees accepted each year and withholding aid from poor countries that refuse to take back failed asylum seekers. But he's also gone around and promised a narrow definition on who qualifies for asylum compared to that offered by the European Convention on Human Rights. And he has also reiterated his support for the government's controversial Rwanda asylum policy, saying he would do whatever it takes to get it up and running. For those of you who don't remember, the Rwanda asylum policy or plan was a highly controversial piece of legislation where refugees that came to England and who failed to meet the qualifications for asylum or refugee status would be sent to Rwanda to kind of set up life there. And it was highly criticized as Rwanda, for lack of to put it lightly, has a very mixed track record with human rights, and
that's as good as you can put it as well. Like there's no better way to say it.
But yes, and Mr. Sunak also voted leave and has vowed to fast track the ripping of EU rules in the previous leadership races. He promised to scrap or reform all EU law or bureaucracy still on the statute book by the time of the next general election, and have initial recommendations on whether each law stays or goes within 100 days. So with Sunak, it seems to be, for now, a mixed bag. For every sort of policy that appeases sort of the general public, he's also promised to he said he was ready to deploy a few £billion to help struggling households. So with every policy that sort of helps the public, benefits the environment, seems more liberal, economic help for the lower classes, for every liberal policy, let's say, there seems to be a hardline conservative policy that pairs with it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does next, or at least what he does during his prime ministerial reign, if you can call it that.
Yeah, and also we have to mention, I think, the fact that on the 17th of November, so that's about a week from when we're recording this podcast, Sunak is expected to announce his fiscal statement. So to announce his plans for the economy, essentially. And pretty much every report I've heard about this has predicted that he would raise taxes and decrease public spending. So that's essentially austerity. And we all know how popular austerity is with the public. And obviously the narrative for the Tories will be that they had to do this. There was no other way. And in a sense, you know, it's kind of true, because obviously the way Truss left the economy in means that essentially there was like the damage that she did was just that significant. So it's not a surprise that he will probably decrease public spending, decrease taxes, but he won't go well with the public. And the economy, I think, at least for now, considering that the Bank of England said that this could be the longest recession since the 1930s, is going to be, the battle is going to be on the economy, right? It's going to be the main point for the next few years, and probably the main point in 2025, in January 2025, when the next general election comes up. So until then, I think, I see what you're trying to say, that he's probably going to move into more conservative ideas as his premiership goes on. But I think that his premiership will be sort of decorated by just middle ground, because he wants those voters back, right? He wants to keep those Tory voters, but he wants to recapture the most important part, which is those in the middle, those that, you know, either vote Labour or vote Conservative, depending on how the last premiership has gone, right? And what gives hope to the Tories, I think, is the fact that Labour historically is not trusted by the public when it comes to the economy, right? So if the battle is fought on the economy and Labour just goes back to not being trusted on that sense, it is, I don't want to say likely, I don't want to say possible, but there is a slight chance that, you know, the Tories can actually reach up to Labour once again, maybe, I think. But again, the lead is too great, so unless there's like a big scandal, I don't think the Tories can really go back, at least for the next general election.
Now, on from talking about potentially bad decisions to talking about actual bad decisions that have already been made. We like to call this segment Why Hollywood Why, where both me and Santos bring a movie to the table that will just kind of make you question what was going through people's heads when they gave this the green light. So, Santos, why don't you start us off? What movie have you brought for our dissecting, if you will?
Right, I'm really glad you said the word dissecting. That's just honestly just given me that transition on a platter. I'm going to talk about the movie Boxing Alina. So that's a 1993 movie. Have you seen it by any chance?
No, I don't think I have.
Right. So I will read you the IMDb sort of like synopsis for the movie. So this is how it goes, word for word. A surgeon becomes obsessed with the seductive woman he once was in an affair with, refusing to accept that she has moved on. He amputates her limbs and holds her captive in his mansion.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the word for word synopsis by IMDb.
Is that?
Yeah,
is that it?
That's it.
Is that the whole movie?
That's essentially it. Yeah. I will give you a few more details. So essentially, he once had an affair with this lady, and he couldn't move on from her. Right. This is a good surgeon. He has a girlfriend, by the way. Her name is Anne, who also happens to be the doctor. and is the opposite of Helena, which is the girl, the woman he had an affair with. So he goes to confront her. He cannot move on, so he goes to confront her, and he essentially wants her back. As they're talking, they are hit by a car, or she's hit by a car. That's what the movie makes it out to be. So he operates on her, and then proceeds to lock her in his mansion, and proceeds to cut off her arms and legs so she can't move, essentially. Right?
Jesus.
Now, at some point throughout the movie, Nick, who is a surgeon, is doing some exercise. He's jumping rope, and he starts imagining his mother naked, telling him that he's done a very bad thing. Right?
Okay.
So anyway, fast forward into essentially the last part of the movie, and spoilers alert for those of you who are really keen on watching this. I wouldn't recommend it, but if
of course, yeah.
But spoiler alert! Spoiler alert for
fan of this movie.
So essentially, Helena somehow manages to speak to someone, and this guy comes and beats Nick up. Right? Now, once he gets beat up, the movie ends essentially with the biggest twist of all time, which is it was all fake. Right? So Nick wakes up in the hospital. He wakes up in the hospital, and it was all a dream. They did get hit by a car, but she was operated by someone else, and she got out of the hospital, and he essentially dreamed all this thing up while he was being operated as well. Once he wakes up, he embraces a Venus statue, which means that he's embracing his mother, which also means he's embracing Helena. And this, by the way, this is a true sort of take away from the movie. This is how some people perceive the movie.
Right.
And the way they wrote it, this one review was that he's embracing the Venus statue, which is his mother, which in turn is Helena, because that's the only real thing that he can really possess, because the statue has no complaints, no feelings, and no life of its own.
That's yeah.
Anyway,
don't think that's one to watch with the family.
Oh no, I would probably not watch it with the kids, I'll tell you that much.
Oh god.
How about you, Akash? What's your movie?
All right. Mine may sound like a cop-out.
Right.
But I really want to talk about this movie because I've watched it recently, and I didn't realize how one, funny it was, 2, well written it was, and 3, batshit insane it was. Right. It's the Simpsons movie from 2007, I think 2008.
What a classic! What a classic!
2008. Have you seen this?
I have seen the movie, yes, but go on.
Yes, the Simpsons movie from 2008, which, not to freak everyone out, but that was, oh my god, I can't even do math. That was 14 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, that was 14 years ago, which upsets me dearly. But the movie, how do I even describe this movie? The why Hollywood why aspect of this movie isn't why it was made, it was the writing. Like, the movie opens with Homer Simpson calling everyone in the movie theater a dumbass, including the people watching the Simpsons movie. Like that, the movie opens with that, and then the next scene, the like climax of the next scene is Green Day dying, which is completely what? Green Day is in the movie and they die because in a Titanic style, like their barge on the lake gets eaten by pollution and they get like they sink, and then they all play violins. There's just so much about that movie that's so weird. You see Bart's, spoiler alert, you see Bart's dick. You see Bart's dick in that movie.
Nice.
Where like Homer and Bart are like daring each other to do stuff, and then Homer dares Bart to like skateboard naked to Krusty Burger and back. And there's this gag where like as Bart's skating across the screen, there's always something covering his penis until the very end where it's like a hedge missing. There's a hedge with the middle missing, so you only see his penis. I don't know what was on the writers' mind. It happened.
It's also really weird the fact that if you think about it, he's a kid.
Yeah.
But sure.
Very questionable. But I think, it's also one of the main plot points in the movie is that, and otherwise the rest of the movie wouldn't really happen. One of the main plot points in the movie is that Homer signed his pig crap silo. Like, his silo, yes, you heard it right, people. Silo of pig crap.
Oh no.
He signed it saying, "If lost, return to Homer Simpson." And that causes the whole town to... Honestly, I could not start to explain most of this movie. You have to watch it for yourself. The jokes are well written and extremely relevant to this day, which is like very, I don't know. It's one of those movies that like, it has some questionable actions, but most of it is kind of timeless. I do recommend everyone watches it. I'm trying to think of any more weird moments off the top of my head.
It was so long ago that I watched that movie as well, so I can't really remember that well. But I remember very well that Bart skateboarding gag. It was there are certainly a lot of moments in that movie that are you just kind of. I'm kind of sad I didn't pick up on them when I watched it, and then a few years ago I watched it again, and it was like, wow, just wow.
Just wow.
Right, so there's no real... I can think of a nice segue from Bart skateboarding naked into what we're about to talk about, so we're just gonna go straight for it. We're moving on to Ukraine, to the conflict in Ukraine, and essentially, the short summary of what's happening is that Ukraine is fighting back steadily, getting territories in some places and losing territories in others, while essentially Putin flexes his nuclear muscles every time anyone says anything about Ukraine winning sort of like the military fight. So I don't mean to make light of what's happening. Obviously, the intricacies to this conflict are endless. But it's just that's not really what we're going to talk about today. Instead, we want to talk about how the US, especially the Democratic Party, is somewhat undermining Ukraine's sovereignty. Or at least that's the kind of read that I have on some of the latest news that we've got coming from there. Akash, what am I talking about? Obviously, we've discussed this. Like, what am I talking about?
So... leading up to the midterms, a group of left-wing Democrats in the U.S. Congress were sort of addressed a letter to the White House, but has later withdrew it. But the letter called for a negotiated settlement to the war in Ukraine. Chairwoman Pramila Jayapal said it was drafted months ago, and that staff released it without it being vetted, whatever that means. The memo actually sparked intra-party backlash before the US midterm elections. So the letter to the White House, which was made public on Monday and was signed in June by 30 of President Joe Biden's fellow Democrats in the House of Representatives, called for the US to negotiate directly with Russia and kind of cutting out Ukraine. Not only does this seem to undermine Ukrainian efforts for its own sovereignty and to end this war with Russia on their terms, but it also seems to undermine the Biden administration, which has repeatedly said that Moscow is not interested in diplomacy. White House officials said in a response that diplomacy is only possible when all sides are prepared to negotiate, and that is currently not the case. I think it would be good to clarify what the midterms are. The midterms are sort of a general election, but not really. The midterms are to elect new members of Congress, the 535 people representing the public who work together to make laws, use public money, and investigate issues. So the U.S. Congress is made out of two houses, so to speak. It's the Senate, who represent the state interests, the state governments, and the House of Representatives, who are responsible for representing the local population. The midterms are called the midterms because they typically take place in the middle of a president's 4-year term of office. So the midterms are for the re-election of Congress members, and the Congress is currently controlled by the Democrats. But the Republicans only need to win 5 extra seats in the House and only 1 extra in the Senate to get a majority. So these are very hotly contested midterms. And it's very interesting that this letter was quote-unquote leaked right before the midterms, as it did cause chaos within the Democratic Party, specifically between the Biden administration, who has made it clear they don't want diplomacy with Russia because it's simply not an option, and it seems like members of the Democratic members of the House of Representatives who seem to want a fast end to this war. The Progressive Caucus said the message was being misconstrued as aligned with a growing reluctance in the Republican Party to keep sending aid to Kiev. Ms. Jayapal, a Washington state congresswoman, said on Tuesday that she still supported an end to the war with diplomacy, but she said the timing of their letter's release meant it had been conflated with Republican opposition. The Republican Party, kind of the more conservative members of American politics, kind of, less on federal spending, more on state spending. So the aid that America is sending to Ukraine, which is in the billions, is kind of opposed by the small members of the Republican Party. Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy warned earlier in October that if his party takes control in November, that there will be no quote-unquote blank check for Ukraine.
Yeah, so so I'm gonna tell you the read that I've got on this, and you tell me if it's what do you think of it, okay? So I think it's not surprising that Republicans have already started to raise eyebrows to the level of aid that is being sent to Ukraine on a regular basis, right? And chunks of the population have either forgotten what is going on or are starting to get fed up with aid being sent while there are so many problems at home. This is not surprising. It makes sense, kind of, right? To the Americans, the Ukraine conflict is something that's happening so far away, and if it weren't for the public support of so many people, it wouldn't even have gotten to this stage where Ukraine is actually able to fight back, right? I think Putin is counting on that. Is counting on the fact that people forget about it, kind of on the fact that people are less willing to help Ukraine, right? So in light of this, what I think is the Democrats are trying to speed up the process. They're trying to speed up the war, especially when it comes to the Democrats, to the more progressive side of the Democrats, I think, because obviously ahead of the midterms, and by the way, once the midterms end, in America, that's essentially when the build up for the next election starts, right? So at the end of the midterms, most forecasts have it that the Republicans are gonna take over the Senate and whatnot, right? They don't have many seats to win, and it's kind of a tradition now that the incumbent, not the incumbent president, but the president seating in the midterms, if they do have sort of full power, let's say, it will sort of get more balance as the opposition party rises a little bit more. So what I think is the Democrats know that their voters expect them to help Ukraine, right? So if they want to appeal to their voters, they have to support the bills that essentially help Ukraine. So the more the war goes on, the more aid they will be forced to support, and the more aid they are forced to support throughout the years, the less likely they are to capture those who are in the middle, those who, maybe they want to help Ukraine, but at the same time they're struggling to buy groceries, and therefore they might change their vote from Democrat to Republican. So it's in their interest to speed up the war so that when the build up to the election starts, the war is kind of a thing of the past, or at least it's in its later stages, it's sort of resoluted, and they have time to recapture those voters, those middle voters, those purple states, as they call it in America, with other sort of topics, for instance, abortion, and economic wise, because that's going to be one of the big topics. So that's the read I've got on the situation. Tell me, Akash, do you think I'm getting this entirely wrong, or like, what do you think of all of this? Like, tell me what you think.
It's very interesting because this comes at a time where it seems as though there is a divide in both the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think this letter being leaked I think it's quite a coincidence that as rifts have begun to appear in the Republican Party about whether to help Ukraine or not, this letter was so-called leaked, which made the Democrats also look to be a bit split on the issue. It's just a happy little coincidence, let's say. But with the Republicans, it's more of a very traditional American problem of whether to export freedom or not. So America has already donated an assistance package which is worth $52 billion US, which is twice as much as all other countries combined. And military experts and the Ukrainian government said that this support has been vital to their mission. So some Republicans, like you said, have been questioning its merits. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley said that Ukraine aid is not in America's interests, and this allows Europe to freeload. However, Mike Pence, their previous vice president, harshly condemned Putin so-called apologists and members of his own party that would, quote-unquote, have us disengaged with the wider world. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell has even called on the White House to step up assistance to Ukraine, saying the US needs to do more to supply the tools Ukraine needs to thwart Russian aggression. However, notably, even though we're seeing cracks in the Republicans and cracks in the Democrats, notably, only Republicans voted against a $40 million aid package to Ukraine in the spring. So it suggests that, in general, the Republican Party are the ones that house those skeptical to Ukrainian aid. And the Democrats, it seems more of their left-leaning lawmakers such as AOC, the more socialist side of the party, are trying to redirect or call for a slow end to Ukrainian aid in order to spend it in other sectors of the US economy. Though this might all be a political bargaining tool, as polls do suggest that public support is still high for Ukraine, even though there are signs that it has softened up as the war drags on. Last month, 20% of Americans said the US is providing too much help, so roughly 1/5 of Americans, which was up from 12% in May and 7% in March. So it really does seem that I think you've already mentioned this, but it really does seem as though there are divides in the parties as to sort of which side of public support to rally behind, whether it's those that believe that the average American is struggling with bills as it is. Where did this $53 billion come from to help another country? Or if it's to those who believe that if we don't help with Ukraine now, then we're going to have to deal with the consequences of Russian aggression tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the takeaway message for me is that it's very interesting that as Republicans seem divided, this letter got suddenly leaked without being vetted. And the Democrats now seem divided as well. I think I'm not suggesting foul play. I'm just saying it seems like a happy coincidence for the Republican Party that now the Democrats seem as divided as they are when the midterms are coming up.
Yeah, and I think we can both agree on that. Like, obviously, you need Ukraine at the negotiating table, right? It's vital for its future, and it's also vital for how conflict is handled going forward, and obviously in other countries. Like, it could be that if the US gets involved on a more personal level, the war comes to an end quicker. But obviously, you don't want the US promising concessions, especially territorial concessions, instead of Ukraine, right? You don't want them to speak for them simply because that will, first of all, discredit Ukraine, and it will discredit America as well, because it kind of makes it almost too involved, and that's ammunition that can be used by Putin as well. So it's really vital that you have Ukraine there on the negotiating table, and you don't have Russia negotiating directly with the US, because I think that the US is supposed to be the middleman here, I think. Because if they're not, then they might as well just send soldiers to the borders, right?
Yeah. I think the real question here is, no matter if the Republicans or Democrats get control of Congress this November, the real question is, how far is America gonna America? Like, how much intervening and defending freedom and democracy are they gonna do? And that concludes another episode of Mildly Interesting. As always, we hope you were mildly interested. If you were, do give us a follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I usually post stuff, keep up to date, make a meme of our fumbles, like the fact that I have been locked out of the accounts and haven't been able to post my episode for a week now. I apologize. Please do not flame me. Go check out our website. It's mildly-interesting.co.uk. Santos has some great pieces of journalistic art up on there, and we have all the episodes up on there as well. go subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that bell so you get notified when we update, and as well as follow us on Spotify, rate the podcast, and get your notifications on so you know when we drop a fresh, hot new episode. But without further ado, I have been Akash Lash.
And I was João Santos.
And this was mildly interesting.